Today, we have someone on our show who is truly remarkable. After heavy doses of medication following intense surgeries, her life took a dramatic turn from corporate America to the arts. I would venture to call it a Bridgeport miracle, if you will. I had the great opportunity with my wife. We went to her studio for an event. It's like a paint and sip event. And I'll let her explain it better. But anyway, her name is Marianne Schmidt. Marianne, welcome to Bridgeport Stories.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Okay. Marianne, first of all, tell us where you're from originally.
Well, I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in Croton-on-Hudson. And for the first 18 years of my life, and then I didn't live home after that. Went to college and moved various places, but landed in Connecticut when I was, I think I was 29.
Mm-hmm. And you entered the corporate world, right?
Yes. I had already been in the corporate world prior to that, working for Izod Lacoste, the alligator shirt company. I traveled in a motorhome around the country and sold those alligator shirts to golf pros and tennis pros.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
All right. So you were a salesperson?
Yes. Always in sales. Yeah.
Always in sales.
Always.
And is this where you thought your life was meant to be?
I'm not sure I knew if it was meant to be anywhere. I was just kind of walking through the next door that opened. Mm-hmm. And they kept opening. They took some pretty dark directions through doors that opened that I shouldn't have walked through. But, my life kind of came undone for a long time as well. Back when I was in my 20s and 30s, I lost control of my life to drugs and alcohol and cocaine addiction even. And, but God brought me back from all that and has used it for good in my life somehow. That brokenness then enables me now to even minister to people who are going through that today.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your journey. So here you are, you're in corporate America, you're doing sales.
Yep.
You have a long career. Yeah. And so you're at least somewhat successful at it. And without an intention, something incredible happens that starts with an injury or an illness. Tell us what the original situation was.
The original situation, well, I have to kind of back it up a little bit. I was a fierce athlete when I was younger. I rode horses at the national level in Madison Square Garden. I was ranked nationally. I was 10th in the nation, and when I rode horses. And so that part of my life went on for 30 years. So it brought with it intense kind of injury to my joints over time. And then when I became active in my corporate life, I suddenly wasn't able to maintain the same kind of active lifestyle. And because I was flying all over the world on jets and to many countries, because I was, as a global account rep, I had to kind of live in the zone I was in, and there wasn't a lot of time for taking care of myself. And so my joints kind of deteriorated over time, kind of like a race car sitting in the driveway that you don't drive.
So being on a horse is the jostling of being on a horse is what you're talking about.
Yes, the wear and tear, the impact on my joints was enormous. And so I was jumping enormous jumps 5 foot off the ground and landing with thunderous hoofbeats on the ground. And I was on that horse's back. And so all of that same impact was happening inside my body, inside my spine, my shoulders, my knees.
And you were successful at this as well.
I was ranked nationally. Really? I was ranked 10th in the nation, and my horses went to college with me, and I was an international, I rode internationally there as well. And
so those are the jumps that the horses do? And
yes. Yes, yes.
Okay.
And so when you're jumping on a horse's back, when they hit the ground, your whole body is hitting the ground on top of the horse's back.
Wow.
And so that impact is hitting your body and affecting you.
So eventually it had such a deteriorating effect or debilitating effect that you needed operations and
Yes.
medication. And tell us about that.
So when my body started to show signs of serious wear and tear, it was probably in my maybe 50 or so. I was 50 maybe, in my 40s maybe. And so I was put on a medication because I had all this neurological pain from my back extending into my arms and my legs. And it was really the compression of my spine and herniations in my spine. I didn't know this at the time, so I was put on a medication. But that really helped the neurological pain. It deferred it. And so for 11 years, I was on that medication. And then the pain started increasing, and I started having surgeries because I needed joint replacements and spinal fusions, and 19 surgeries later.
Oh, my goodness.
19 surgeries later, and I have metal in 6 places in my body. I really am a bionic woman. I'm a miracle that I'm alive. And I have many joint replacements, including 2 years ago, reverse shoulder replacement and hip replacement. And so these things some of the pain was managed using a medication that was non-narcotic because you didn't build a tolerance to this medication. Mm-hmm. And the thought was that it would be safer for me. And I trusted my doctors. And I actually still trust them, but they didn't mean to hurt me. They weighed the risks and kept raising the dose of that medication.
So something eventually happened to you. You had a brain injury?
Well, it was, I'll call it a brain event. Many people would say a brain injury because seriously, that's what it was. It was an overdose of medication. The medication got too high. I knew it because I wasn't feeling myself. I tried to tell people, and they didn't. Nobody kind of understood that. And but I was the best student of my own body, so I determined on my own what was wrong, and without the help of doctors, I took myself slowly down off this medication. But during that time, I was in kind of a very shifted reality, because my brain was deeply affected by neurological changes and patterns that were changed as a result of this medication. And I began to see the most beautiful colors in my mind. I was like, oh my goodness, what was that?
This is upon recovery from?
This is kind of as I'm dosing down and kind of seeing, oh my goodness, like, ooh, what was that? And I was also very disabled because I had just had another surgery, so couldn't drive anywhere. All I could do was draw, but I never could draw before.
Were you a great artist before?
Never. I loved color. I loved the way things looked. I could put a room together, kind of balancing color in a room, but I had no ability to draw at all.
Stick figures, basically.
Yeah, stick figures.
and so all of a sudden...
Not even that very well.
Not even that very well. So all of a sudden, was this like a revelation to you?
Well, I sensed in my heart that God was saying to me, pick up a pencil. I want you to design an umbrella. And I said to myself, an umbrella? Really? That's kind of odd. Why would I do that, God? And he said, because it's a symbol of my protection over you during this really hard time for you. And so when I picked up the pencil that day, I just, in faith, believing that this is what he was telling me to do, and I began to draw, I found that I could draw just like a photograph. And it was so shocking to me that it was, and the first thing I did was draw a zebra's head. In this, and an umbrella is little pizza-shaped slices that all go around in a circle. And so I put one of those down, and then I made copies of it and put it around in a circle. And when I did that, I was looking at the art from every direction, upside down, backwards, forward, sideways, and from an aerial view. All of these things were happening at once. And all of these other patterns began to burst out of the art, things that I couldn't have seen if I was just looking at it from one direction. And I could see things in it that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And other people began to do the same.
Like a new eye opened up,
Yeah,
or
like
a new perception.
And what I didn't understand at the time is that this very exercise, this exact exercise, is called radial symmetry. And it is a tool used by art therapists on people who have had brain injuries to rehabilitate them. Wow. And God had said, just design an umbrella because I'm protecting you. And really, he was healing me.
And if there's a term that could be used for what you were going through, would it be acquired savant syndrome?
So during the process, I met with neuropsychologists and some really smart people trying to get an idea of what had happened. And as they began to test me, there was no way to chart some of my abilities because they were not on their charts. And I had never been that girl. I was below average student. I was super athletic, but to have the abilities for math and spatial relationships and this kind of thing was never something that was just not part of who I was. And this was all brand new. And but the part that was really hard was that my processing time was really slow because they explained to me that with acquired savant syndrome, you're taking in much more information than other people. And what had happened to my brain is that in my autonomic nervous system, the filters that keep information out were damaged. We all have filters that keep us from saying things and keep information from coming in also. And those filters were down. So I would say things that people didn't understand, but I was also receiving things that just in looking around me that were patterning in my mind way differently and manifesting themselves in art. And it was this amazing thing that began to happen. I couldn't drive anywhere. I had a shoulder surgery, plus I couldn't even take care of myself. I couldn't take a shower by myself. I couldn't do anything. Couldn't remember how to get dressed. But I could draw. So I sat and I did that about 14 hours a day. And in the process, it was like having a new pony. Were you
inspired to do that?
Yes, it was like having a new pony. And if I was doing something I could never do before, so I wanted to do it all the time. It was just really, really fun. And then at the end of every piece of art I would do, when I put it all together, there was this big surprise. I would do one little triangular piece, but when I put it all together, it became something altogether different. So I would have to go to Kinko's to do that and make really nice copies of a little triangular piece of art that I'd drawn, and then assemble it. And people at Kinko's would see these pieces of art and be inspired themselves. And so one thing led to another, and eventually, within just a few months of that time, art burst out of me in such a way that I won an international art contest for equine among equine artists called the Equus Film Festival. And I was up against lifetime artists from all over the world, and I'd been drawing for 6 months.
I saw that piece, and that was truly an emotional piece.
Yeah.
The horse and the wind in the mane, and it was just beautiful. Yeah. And hopefully we'll be able to post some of your pictures on our website when we air this, so that people can see what we're talking about. And so at that point, what did you say to yourself in terms of where this is going to go?
Well, I kind of always knew it was going someplace big, because why would this happen unless there was something that was going to come from it that a lot of people could benefit from? It was already seeming pretty big to me then, but other people didn't understand it because it was happening to me. It wasn't happening to them. They just saw this kind of amazing thing happening, and for some people it was a little bit scary, like my family.
Yeah, so how did people who were close to you respond, seeing as how you were going through this drastic change?
It was hard for them, really hard for them, because I was not the mother or wife that anyone signed up for. And although I didn't sign up for what happened to me, they didn't sign up for that. So even though they could see that the changes were going someplace really good, they were still clinging to the other person that they had known, who was good too, but certainly not perfect. But this was going somewhere, and I just kept walking through the doors, no matter what someone said, and I just knew that this is what I had to do, and that led me to doing art in my home for groups. It was really never a sip and paint experience for me. It was never about that. Lots of people do that, but I never did that. It was always something really different because God was so much a part of it. And for the people in the room, it's become more and more powerful over time. But even from the very first moment, it began transforming lives. And the very first time I ever did a group experience was in the Red Mango in Fairfield, which is no longer even there. But just last week, I got a call. That was 4 years ago. Just last week, I got a call from someone who was coming on Saturday with a group who was a friend of someone who was at that event 4 years ago. And they are coming to my studio now.
So 4 years ago, you started having social paint type events.
Yes.
Explain to the audience what that event was or what those events were.
Well, I would design a painting that I felt was simple enough for others to do too, if I led them through the process. And sometimes I would see paintings that other people had done, simple things online, and I would modify them. Or sometimes I would just start from scratch. Now I only start from scratch. But then it was different. You know, I wasn't confident in my own abilities, so I kind of built on what other people did. And then I would lead a group through the process of creating something beautiful. And at the end, I would help them along the way, and someone might have trouble with the color of a flower or this or that, and I'd help them through
Now,
that.
when I went last week, it was more than just a painting experience. It was more of a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
When did that happen? Right from the beginning?
Right from the beginning, although never to the degree it was with you. In fact, it had never been like that before your group. Wow. That was the very first time that happened. Who knows what will happen next? When God's leading the way, there's no telling.
To let the audience know, it was a church group of married couples who got together, who were inspired to be with you by one of the members, and there was a serene experience at the beginning, a spiritual connection, a very silent moment before the painting started.
Yeah.
And so tell me about what your process is like.
Well, the process is that studio that you were in is called Be Still Studio. Be Still Studio. I had another studio also right next to that for 2 years prior. So, but then one of the artists in our building was shot walking down the street and murdered right here in Bridgeport, just a few blocks from here.
Now, this is somebody you know.
Yes, this was my hairdresser just 4 months ago. You could walk there from where I'm sitting right now, where she died. And she was my hairdresser in the next studio, and she was a beautiful black woman. And I had this hunger for diversity in my life, all my life, but especially after this brain event. I knew that I wanted to be around people that weren't just like me, that I wanted to be able to grow, and from just the diversity, I believe, God has designed us for diversity. And if we're not in a diverse setting, we're missing so much. And the town that I live in, Trumbull, is not diverse at all. And so I knew that I wasn't going to move, so at least I could get a studio in a place that was diverse. So I took the studio in Bridgeport. Then I had a good time with that, but then my girlfriend who did my hair was shot walking down the street 4 months ago, and I went.
What happened?
She was walking down the street with a friend who I guess had a criminal past. He had been in prison, but his life was kind of better again, but his past kind of hunted him down. And they were walking on the street. She had just purchased a hair salon of her very own, and someone drove by and shot him, and she was shot too, and they both died. And it was devastating to me. So in all of my life, all the brokenness I'd ever gone through, so many things, 19 surgeries, doctor's mishaps, all kinds of terrible things. I had never experienced gun violence. And now that was a part of my story too. And so I knew when I spoke at the funeral of this girl, and I explained how she walked by my studio and she saw me creating this giant butterfly. And she'd giggle and she'd say, well, that's dope. And the next time it was further down the completion process, and she'd say the same thing. And then finally, at the very, very end, I was just about ready to take it down off the wall. And I noticed she was standing behind me. And I was painting in the vacant studio next to my studio at the time because my studio was under construction. I had to paint in this vacant studio. And she was standing there eating my peanut butter crackers she'd taken out of my cabinet. And she was crying because there wasn't another word better than dope for her. So she held me. And then she was killed. That was my last. She said, this is beautiful. And so when I spoke at the funeral, I shared the story about how this had happened and how I had a hunger for diversity. And in the end, I said, she was transformed like that butterfly because of the faith that she took on 3 days before she was shot. She's in heaven now. And I want to do something because now this gun violence is part of my story, and I know, and it's a first time for me, but many of you have had to live with this your whole lives. I'm so sorry that that's the case. What can I do to help? And 1,000 people at that point came to their feet shouting, yes. And in that moment, I felt God say to my spirit, oh, you had better get a bigger boat because you're going to need it. And I left the funeral and went back and rented that empty studio right next to mine that I'd been forced to paint in because I knew that if God said it and said, get a bigger boat, that it was not only going to float, it was going to sail. So that's where I am, sailing, maybe with a power engine.
Do we know where we're going?
Do we know where we're going? I think so. Yeah, I think I do. I'm called to help people heal through art. This studio is dedicated to healing from gun violence, but really, we're all broken. And so it's to help people heal from whatever it is they're experiencing in their life. They don't even need to know my story, but it helps if they know what I've come through. And they know that I'm standing before them, and I should have been dead probably 6 times, even before I ever picked up, before I ever became an artist, just all the falls I took on horses and animals rolling on top of me that were a ton and crashing through jumps and all the other things in life that brought me to that point.
What's the commonality?
So that I was continually rising above, and I was healed again and again and again for this moment in time, so that I could be used to help others do the same.
Do you see the same thing in the families who live here in Bridgeport and what they go through? With the violence that they're victimized by?
The first part of the question, I'm sorry.
Well, what you're going through and what families who are different than you, right? Let's say a family of color who lives in poverty, who sees violence or fears violence for their family members.
Yes.
How do you relate to that?
Well, because I'm still grieving the loss of my friend in a very deep way, and also my dog that I'd had for 20 years. 20-year-old dog died in my arms the week before. So animals were always a part of this vision as well, that animals wearing art, maybe horses wearing art, but certainly dogs wearing art in my studio. When people came into the studio, especially if they were maybe from an urban setting, weren't used to animals, would be able to then have an experience with an animal's love that would impact them and begin to heal them, just the warmth of an animal's love.
So
love is at the heart of everything.
Grief,
yes.
These are all things that we go through in similar ways, despite where we come from.
Love is at the heart of it. Some might think otherwise. Sometimes I think people who don't understand me, they might think it's pity or it's something else, but no, it's not. It's just love to heal the brokenness in anyone, no matter what you've come from or faced.
So you dare to believe and have faith that your healing is a divine intervention.
I know it is.
And that there's a purpose that comes from somewhere else that transmits through you.
Yes, very, very much so. And it continues to do that. There have been people healed of disease right in front of me. I just try to stay out of God's way and let him do it by being as invisible as possible, but visible enough to inspire.
That is powerful and inspiring. So we talked a little bit about where you're going. Where are you at this moment in that journey?
Well, I have both of these.
Are you building the boat?
Yeah, the boat. Well, the first part of the boat is built. I believe it'll be that whole building and that whole property in a short period of time, one way or another. But starting with just even the first studio was a step of faith. So now to have two is when I had no idea or knowledge of how I would pay for it. And now on my calendar, through those steps of faith, I am booked out all the way through April. And even in just the next 30 days, well over 200 people will walk through the doors of my studio.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so your mission is otherworldly.
I guess so. I mean, I'm kind of more in the moment. But otherworldly is what drives me. It drives who I am. I kind of forget that when I'm so in the moment at times, because I'm just doing that thing that's going to help that person, forgetting what's way bigger and what's around me. But at the heart of it is just love. And
it's love. It's the love you have for the people around you.
And the love I have for God.
Yes. That's where it comes
healed
from.
Me. He's a healer. His name is Jehovah Rapha. That's Hebrew for healer. And he's healed me. He continues to heal me. And through me, I believe he wants to heal others. And so that's my purpose.
It's a noble, wonderful purpose, spiritual purpose. And I think I wish the best for you. And
so much,
I'm
Frank.
so happy for you. and I can see it in your soul and your spirit. So keep doing it. I'll keep telling people about it. Hopefully hopefully they'll book a well enough in advance. So where do they book if they want to find out more?
I have I have lots of pages, but I have 2 very active pages on. I have 5 pages on Facebook.
Okay.
But our generation, the boomers, are Facebook. The millennials are Instagram. I'm also active on Instagram, but I have so much going on that I kind of can't do it all. So they find me through Be Still Studios on Facebook, and also Marianne Schmidt on Facebook.
Schmidt is spelled with a D, correct?
SCHMIDT, and my cell phone is, I guess.
You can if you want. It's up to you.
Yeah, sure. 203-257-5875.
It has been truly a pleasure, and I hope that God continues to bless you. I know He will because of what you're doing, and it's a wonderful, wonderful mission. And I can tell people from firsthand experience that it's something they need to be a part of.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Coming here, and from my corporate background, I just couldn't not research about you, and find out who you are and just how acclaimed you are. It was shocking to me, your accomplishments, really. And the fact that, the Academy, that's who you are, your vision, your ability, and that someone like you, would reach out to someone like me, to me just blows my mind. Thank you so much.
We're all here for the same reasons.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
All right. God bless. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. I think you will probably tune into our next one because of your experience here today. So stay tuned. God bless, and we'll see you soon.